The tension was thick before the first question even landed. Jasmine Crockett and Ivanka Trump had been booked for a live panel on women in politics. But anyone who knew their history knew this would be anything but polite. Halfway through, Ivanka's repeated interruptions pushed Jasmine into delivering a line so raw and unfiltered that the room fell silent. And the internet hasn't stopped talking about it since. The stage was set in a semicircle of sleek white chairs against a deep blue backdrop, bright lights cutting across the faces of the guests. The moderator, veteran journalist Renee Falco, opened with a soft, uncontroversial question about bridging political divides. On one end sat Jasmine, poised in an emerald blazer that seemed to catch every bit of light. On the other, Ivanka, ivory dress immaculate, expression calm but watchful. They hadn't exchanged so much as a nod before sitting down. Jasmine answered first, speaking in her trademark direct style. As a black woman in politics, the standard isn't just to be competent, it's to be flawless. And even then, people still search for a reason to discredit you. That's the reality for millions of women without a safety net. Heads in the audience nodded until Ivanka leaned forward and cut in. I think it's important to keep discussions productive, she said in that measured, PR-ready tone. Sometimes when the tone is too combative, it shuts people out instead of bringing them in. The subtext hung in the air. Jasmine's lips tightened. She didn't flinch, but the crowd caught the shift in energy. I'm talking about survival, Jasmine replied evenly. And survival doesn't always sound polished. It sounds real. The audience murmured. Cameras zoomed in, Jasmine steady, Ivanka composed but tense. Later, as Jasmine described Texas women working 2 and 3 jobs just to survive, Ivanka interrupted again. We should focus on opportunity, not grievances. People respond better when they feel respected. And respect starts with how we communicate. This time, Jasmine didn't look at the moderator. She turned straight to Ivanka. Respect, she repeated, letting it linger. Respect is earned, not handed to you, because of who your father is. The room erupted in scattered claps. Producers in the control room exchanged wide-eyed glances. They'd booked this for ratings, and now they had lightning in a bottle. Renee tried to smooth the edges, moving on to other panelists. But every camera in the room kept drifting back to Jasmine and Ivanka, 2 faces, side by side, locked in a quiet, dangerous standoff. And Jasmine's expression said one thing clearly. She wasn't done. You can't talk about cooperation, Jasmine said, her voice steady, when half the room refuses to even acknowledge the lived reality of the other half. That's not cooperation. That's denial. A few scattered claps echoed through the studio, rare for a live political panel. Ivanka's eyes flicked toward the audience before turning back to Jasmine. I don't think anyone here is denying reality, Ivanka replied smoothly. But there's a difference between raising awareness and alienating people who might otherwise be allies. I think your tone sometimes. She paused, searching for a word that wouldn't sound like a direct jab, doesn't invite collaboration. The crowd shifted in their seats. Jasmine's eyes narrowed, but she let the silence breathe, just long enough for the tension to thicken. You know what's funny about that? She finally said. I've heard that same critique my whole life, from teachers, from bosses, from people who could have made things easier, but chose not to. And it's never about tone. It's about control. A low ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Some leaned in. Others shifted uncomfortably. I just think leadership means listening, Ivanka said after a beat, adjusting her microphone with a practiced smile. Listening works best when people feel safe to speak without being attacked. We can't elevate the conversation if we're tearing each other down. Let's be clear, Jasmine shot back. Truth can feel like an attack when you're not ready to hear it. That's not my problem to fix. My responsibility is to represent the people. Who sent me here and there? Reality doesn't get softer just because it's uncomfortable. This time, the applause was louder, as the moderator tried to pivot toward economic policy. Jasmine's gaze occasionally drifted back to Ivanka, who now sat with a straighter spine. Her composure intact, but tighter than before. Jasmine spoke about wage gaps, crushing healthcare costs, and how structural barriers lock people into cycles they can't escape. Her examples hit hard. A single mother in Amarillo juggling 2 jobs and still barely covering rent. A retired factory worker in Lubbock spending half his pension on insulin. These aren't statistics, she said. These are people. And the last thing they need is someone telling them their tone isn't nice enough. The applause came again, strong, sustained. Ivanka waited for her turn. We can agree everyone deserves opportunity, she said, but opportunity comes from building, not breaking each other down. We all have a responsibility to elevate. You're talking about dialogue like it's a performance. Jasmine cut in, leaning forward. For me, it's not. It's survival. And survival isn't elevated. It's fought for. The pause that followed was heavy, electric. Even the moderator's attempt to steer them back couldn't break it. When asked about their different paths to leadership, Jasmine didn't soften. I came up from the ground, she said. I've been broke. I've been one rent payment away from losing my home. I've been in courtrooms fighting for people who couldn't pay me. Every decision I make, I measure against whether it helps someone in that position. Her voice carried the weight of lived experience and the kind of finality that made it clear she wasn't asking for approval. The audience was locked in quiet, attentive until Ivanka leaned forward, tilting her head just enough to seem engaged while letting skepticism show. I think your experience is admirable, she began, voice silk over steel. But leadership also requires vision. Sometimes, focusing too much on hardship keeps people locked in the same mindset. If we want to move forward, we have to shift the conversation to what's possible. It was polite on the surface, but the barb was obvious. Jasmine was dwelling on problems, not solutions. Jasmine smiled faintly. You can't shift the conversation without acknowledging what's in the room. And for a lot of people, what's in the room is hunger, eviction notices, and hospital bills. That's not a mindset. That's reality. Applause burst out, louder than before. It didn't die quickly this time. For a split second, Ivanka's polished mask tightened. Moderator Renee jumped in. Let's try to keep this constructive, Congresswoman. Crockett, you've argued for urgency. Miss Trump, you've spoken about opportunity. Is there common ground? There's always common ground when everyone's standing on the same floor, Jasmine replied, locking eyes with Ivanka. The problem is, some people start the conversation from the penthouse. The crowd erupted laughter, clapping a ripple of agreement. Ivanka gave a tight-lipped smile, the kind you give when you'd rather not be smiling at all. A policy analyst on the panel mentioned tone, and Ivanka seized on it. Exactly. Tone matters. If the goal is to change minds, you can't start by putting people on the defensive. Jasmine's smile vanished. She leaned in, voice low but carrying. I've been told to soften my voice my whole life to make it easier for people who already have the power to change things. And guess what? They didn't change a thing. They just got more comfortable while we stayed stuck. Gasps, murmurs, a slow headshake from a woman in the front row. Ivanka kept her posture flawless. I'm not dismissing your experiences, she said evenly. But leadership means choosing language that builds rather than divides. Jasmine let out a short, incredulous laugh. No, that's not all you're saying. You're saying people like me should filter the truth so people like you don't feel uncomfortable. And I'm not here to make you comfortable. The studio froze. Cameras zoomed in Jasmine's unblinking stare, Ivanka's chin tilted higher, her smile no longer touching her eyes. Renee started, but Jasmine cut her off. We can talk policy all day, but until we talk about who's actually affected and listen without sanding down the truth, nothing changes. Maybe some people don't want it to. The air shifted. There was no going back now. Renee, still holding. The reins pivoted. When it comes to inspiring the next generation of women leaders, what's the most important trait to develop? Ivanka answered first, reclaiming the floor. I believe the key trait is composure. When young women see leaders handle disagreements with grace, they learn that strength doesn't have to be loud. It was about knowing your worth without needing to shout it. Ivanka's delivery was crisp, deliberate more than an answer. It was a subtle critique. Jasmine sat still, hands folded in her lap, eyes locked on Ivanka. The audience sensed the static in the air, their silence broken only by the faint rustle of papers backstage. When Ivanka finished, Renee turned. Congresswoman Crockett, your thoughts? Jasmine didn't look at Renee. Her gaze never left Ivanka. Her voice was low, every syllable honed. You want to talk about grace? Grace is telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Grace is showing up for people who can't pay you back. And grace is not mistaking silence for strength. Nods rippled through the crowd, and about this idea of shouting. Jasmine leaned forward, elbows on her knees. I don't raise my voice to hear myself talk. I raise it because for years, no one listened when I whispered. And when I finally spoke up, they told me to be polite, to be palatable so they could stay comfortable in their ignorance. The applause started in pockets, then swelled. Ivanka stayed composed, a faint smirk playing at her lips until Jasmine's voice dropped. Cold. Shut your mouth until you've lived what I've lived. It hit like a stone in water. Heavy, sudden, impossible to ignore. Silence held the room for half a beat, then shattered into gasps, startled laughs, and raw applause. Ivanka blinked once, lips tightening into a smile. Renee cleared her throat, scrambling to pivot. Let's bring it back to policy specifics. But the audience wasn't moving on. In the front row, a young woman clapped so hard her ring struck her palm. A man shook his head, grinning like he'd just seen history. The cameras zoomed in on Jasmine, steady, unflinching. When the noise faded, she spoke again. Calm but unyielding. I'm not here to be anyone's token example of civility. I'm here to represent people who've been told to wait their turn. Lower their voices and smile while they're struggling. If that makes someone uncomfortable, so be it. My job isn't to make you comfortable. My job is to make change. More applause this time. Even a panelist 2 seats from Ivanka joined in before stopping himself. Renee's lips twitched, almost a smile. Ivanka crossed her legs slowly, adjusting her dress. Well, she said lightly, I think we can agree we both care deeply about the future of women in leadership. Care is a verb, Jasmine replied. It's not about saying the right thing on camera. It's about doing the hard thing when no one's watching. The crowd rumbled in approval. Renee finally called for a break, but off camera, the energy didn't settle. Some crew members avoided Ivanka's eyes. Others leaned in to whisper encouragement to Jasmine. When the broadcast returned, the studio felt transformed. The panel looked the same, but the atmosphere was charged. The audience leaning in as if this were no longer a discussion, it was a reckoning. And at the center of it sat Jasmine, back straight, calm, and utterly immovable. There was a tightness in Ivanka's posture, now subtle, but unmistakable, like she was holding herself a little too still. Moderator. Renee Falco tried to ease the air for the second half of the discussion, thanking the audience for their engagement and reminding them about the importance of hearing a range of perspectives. It was the kind of diplomatic buffer moderators use when they're smoothing over tension without acknowledging it outright. But the audience wasn't smoothing over anything. They were still turning over the line Jasmine had delivered before. The break, in the second row. A man in a navy sweater leaned toward the woman beside him and whispered, "She said what everyone's been thinking." The woman just smiled knowingly, eyes fixed on Jasmine. A few rows back, a college student, in a denim jacket, typed into her phone, likely posting the moment online before the program even wrapped. If you glanced around, you could catch the glow from scattered screens. The beginning of the story's second life. Already pulsing through the internet in real time. Renee's first post-break. Question went to a nonprofit director from Portland. He spoke earnestly about mentorship programs and support networks for women in leadership. Thoughtful, well-structured points, but the audience's attention kept drifting back to the silent pull between Jasmine and Ivanka. When it was Jasmine's turn, she didn't revisit the pre-break exchange. Instead, she stepped neatly into the thread of conversation and stitched her message into it with precision. "Mentorship is important," she said, "but it can't just be about opening doors for people who look like you or who already have resources. If you're only lifting up people who are already halfway to the top, you're not changing the system, you're reinforcing it." The applause this time was different, lower, steadier, people nodding as they clapped. Ivanka's smile stayed fixed, but her eyes sharpened in focus. When the question came to her, she reframed. "Change happens when we focus on what unites us," she said. "It's not about where you start, it's about where you're going. If we fixate on differences, we risk losing the chance to build something better together." Polite claps. Nothing more when Renee asked if Jasmine wanted to add anything. She leaned in. "Where you start matters," she said plainly. "It shapes the obstacles you face, the resources you have, and how much grace you're given when you stumble. Ignoring that doesn't make it go away, just makes it easier to pretend the playing field is already level." A beat of silence, then applause rolling through the room like a wave. Even a few people who'd been reserved earlier joined in. Renee shot a glance at the control room, maybe weighing whether they'd already drifted too far from the safe talking points, but didn't. Cut it short. From then on, every time Jasmine spoke, the room leaned in. Every time Ivanka responded, there was acknowledgement. But no spike of energy. Somewhere in the back, a man murmured to a stranger, "That line's going viral." And it already was. Twitter, now branded X, was filling with clips of Jasmine's "shut your mouth" moment. Screenshots spread with captions like "This is how you check privilege in real time." The broadcast still had ground to cover, but the verdict was set. The audience, both in the studio and online, had just witnessed a moment worth remembering. And what came after the cameras stopped rolling would turn that moment into something even bigger. If the first half of the show had been tense, the second half felt like a controlled storm, everyone aware that a single wrong move could blow it open. But Jasmine wasn't here for sound bites. She was playing a longer game. Renee pivoted to policy, her tone steady. "Congresswoman Crocker, you've been vocal about expanding federal support for working parents. Could you outline your approach?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "It starts with treating childcare and parental leave as essential, not optional luxuries," she said. "Right now, too many working parents, especially single mothers. Would you like me to finish this rewrite so it flows seamlessly into the rest of the scene? No parent should ever be forced to choose between earning a paycheck and caring for their newborn," Jasmine said, her voice calm but unshakable. "That's not a choice any decent society should impose." The tone was softer than her earlier sparring with Ivanka, but the weight behind her words made the room lean in. She shared the story of a mother in El Paso, 2 weeks postpartum, still in physical pain. Running on fractured sleep, boarding a bus in the dark pre-dawn just to keep her job because her unpaid leave had run out. Jasmine's words drew the picture so clearly that the silence in the room felt heavy. Intentional. Even Ivanka kept her gaze locked on Jasmine, her trademark polite smile replaced by something more neutral. When moderator Renee turned to her, Ivanka said evenly, "I think we all want to see parents supported. I've advocated for public-private partnerships to expand access without burdening small businesses." Jasmine leaned in slightly, not with heat, but with precision. And what happens when those partnerships never reach the parents who need them most? What happens when they only cover certain industries or only benefit people who already have? Enough to get by. Ivanka hesitated, just long enough for the moment to register. That's why we work with companies to broaden participation. She offered. But we both know, Jasmine said, sharper now. Not every company is lining up to do the right thing unless they have to. That's the difference between suggestion and legislation. Suggestion is what you give when you want to look like you're helping. Legislation is what you give when you actually are. This time, the applause was firm and steady, not the explosive cheers from earlier, but the grounded kind that signals agreement. Sensing the tension rising again, Renee tried to pivot toward unity. "It sounds like you share the same goal, but approach it differently. Is there a path forward where those meet?" Jasmine didn't miss a beat. Looking straight into the camera, she said, "The way forward is to stop pretending we're starting from the same place. Some of us are still at the bottom of the mountain, while others were born halfway up. We can talk all day about the view from the top, but if you're not willing to help build the path for everyone else, you're not leading your sightseeing." It landed like a hammer, wrapped in velvet, visual, concise, and impossible to ignore. The studio audience erupted, and even viewers at home could feel the shift. Ivanka's smile flickered back, but thinner now. "I believe in building that path," she said. "I just don't believe we have to tear people down to do it." "Sometimes," Jasmine replied evenly. "The structures you call people are actually just walls in disguise." The crowd roared, part admiration, part release. It wasn't just what she said, but the precision in her timing, the restraint in her delivery. From then on, even as Renee steered the conversation towards safer topics, mentorship, education, the audience's focus was fixed on Jasmine by the final minutes. Renee wrapped the panel with smiles and thanks, but the contrast was telling. Jasmine sat with quiet satisfaction. Ivanka's polished composure masked a jaw set just a little too tight. When the red light on the cameras switched off, the real aftershock began. Audience members who had been discreetly filming moments on their phones now had their clips queued up to post. Hashtags like hashtag Jasmine Crockett, hashtag live TV moment, and hashtag shut your mouth were already spreading before the panelists had even stood up. A makeup artist slipped over to Jasmine and whispered, "You might want to freshen up, you're about to be everywhere." Backstage, crew members scrolled through their feeds, trading phones to show each other clips, already racking up thousands of likes in minutes. A young production assistant grinned at the comment section of a TikTok video. Finally, someone said it. She ate and left no crumbs. "This is why I vote." On X, formerly Twitter, political commentators were already weighing in. One Boston Globe journalist summed it up in 7 words. "That's how you win a debate." Jasmine Crockett had just delivered one of the most unfiltered political moments in recent memory. "That line will be studied," one commentator declared, while another, far less impressed, called it the kind of incivility that turns people away from politics. But even that critique was being drowned out online, swamped by replies defending her blunt honesty. In the green room, a middle-aged academic from Ohio leaned over to her. "You just bought yourself a week's worth of headlines, for better or worse." Jasmine didn't blink. "Then I better make sure they're the right headlines." Meanwhile, Ivanka exited swiftly, flanked by 2 aides determined to hustle. her into a waiting SUV without a single question. She gave the crew a polite wave and never looked back. Outside, photographers managed a few quick shots before the door shut and the car pulled away. Jasmine stayed. She spoke with the moderator, shook hands with lingering audience members, posed for a few selfies. Every handshake, every smile, was a chance to steer the narrative herself. She knew how quickly a story could be twisted once social media got hold of it. Within an hour, the shut your mouth exchange was everywhere: TikTok stitches, Twitter threads, Instagram reposts, cable news replays. One network framed it as Crockett confronts Trump on live TV sparks debate. Another went for shock value: Crockett to Ivanka, Trump, shut your mouth. A rideshare driver recognized her as she slid into the back seat. You were on TV just now, right? My sister just sent me a video of you. That was, wow. That was real, Jasmine said with a faint smile. Her phone was a wall of notifications, texts from colleagues, emails from reporters, mentions from celebrities she'd never met. One message stood out. A former constituent wrote, "You said what I always wished someone in power would say to people who don't get it." Thank you. By the time she reached her hotel, the story had escaped the political bubble. Morning talk shows, booked body language experts, late-night hosts prepped monologues. One outlet's poll showed more than 70% of respondents agreed with her approach. It was both a gift and a test. Her words were reaching far beyond that studio, but for days, maybe weeks, they would be dissected, replayed, reframed. She wasn't rattled. If anything, she felt a spark of energy sitting at her desk. Scrolling through the flood of reactions, she began jotting notes. If people were listening now, she thought, she had a responsibility to decide what they heard next. But before she could plan her move, the scene backstage took a turn. The green room still held the warmth of stage lights as Jasmine entered, flanked by two aides talking over each other. Camille Ortiz, her sharp-tongued strategist, had a phone in one hand and a water bottle in the other. "It's everywhere," Camille said, without preamble. CNN's already clipped it. MSNBC's calling it a defining exchange. Fox has it on loop, but you know how they'll spin it, Miguel. The younger staffer added, "We've got interview requests from The View, Good Morning America, even a couple of non-political podcasts." Jasmine took the water, set it down unopened. Let's be smart. We don't jump at every microphone just because it's there. This isn't about me looking clever on a soundbite. It's about people understanding the point I was making. Door swung open. Moderator Renee Falco stepped in, still in stage makeup, but visibly worn down. "That," she said with a long exhale, "was one of the most electric things I've ever seen in that studio. I have no—" Renee leaned against the doorframe, her stage makeup still in place, but her tone more candid now. "I have no idea what the network execs will say tomorrow," she said, "but thank you for being honest out there." Jasmine gave a faint smile. "I don't think I had a choice. People keep poking at the tone like that's the real issue." Renee's expression was knowing. "You realize people will call it a meltdown, right? Doesn't matter how calm you stayed if it serves them. They'll frame it that way." "I know," Jasmine replied, twisting the cap off her water at last. "But I've been called worse for doing less." A knock interrupted them. A tall woman in a navy suit stepped in, introducing herself as Leah Monroe, a political consultant, who'd been in the audience with another client. "I just wanted to say what you did out there is going to resonate, not just for a news cycle," Leah said. "You've got people who've never cared about these panels suddenly paying attention." Camille shot Jasmine a glance that clearly meant, "See, this is the moment to build on." Leah handed over a small card. "If you ever want to talk about expanding your media strategy, I think there's a way to channel this energy into something that moves the needle." Jasmine accepted the card politely without committing. She knew the spotlight always attracted new allies. Miguel leaned in, voice low. "You're trending #1 on Twitter, not just in politics." Overall, the room went still for a moment. Jasmine leaned back, letting it register. "Then we make sure it's for the right reasons," she said. Another knock came this time from a stage crew member in a headset. "Congresswoman, there's someone outside who says they just want to shake your hand. Says they've been trying to meet you for years." Jasmine hesitated. Encounters like this could be genuine or setups. But when the crew member described the visitor as an older woman in a maroon scarf, Jasmine's expression softened. "Let her in." The woman entered slowly, leaning on a cane, her eyes lighting with recognition. "I saw you speak in Dallas." "Years ago," she said, her voice trembling. "I remember thinking if she ever gets a bigger stage, she's going to change things." Today, I saw it. For a moment, the room fell silent. No buzzing phones, no rapid-fire strategy talk, just the quiet sincerity of the moment. Jasmine reached out and took the woman's hand in both of hers. "That means more than you know," she said. The woman smiled, squeezed her hand, and left as quietly as she'd come. Camille and Miguel stayed silent, but Jasmine could see the weight of the exchange in their faces. Leah Monroe broke the stillness. "You've got a choice here. This can be remembered as a great clapback on TV or as the moment that pushes a national conversation forward. Which one it becomes is up to you." Jasmine glanced at her phone, where dozens of unread notifications waited. "Then we'd better make the right choice," she said. Outside the green room, the reaction was already spreading. By morning, the clip wasn't just a trending topic, it had become a cultural litmus test. News outlets across the spectrum ran it on repeat, each tailoring the framing to their audience. One network overlaid triumphant music under Jasmine's line, calling it the, quote, "heard across America." Another slowed the clip down and replayed it 3 times, using it as proof of partisan hostility. But the most telling reactions weren't on TV, they were in everyday spaces. In Dallas, a barista with a Vote Local pin kept a tablet propped up on the counter, replaying the exchange for customers who stopped mid-order to watch. Some laughed, others murmured approval. In Phoenix, 2 college students debated at a bus stop. Was Jasmine's bluntness exactly what politics needed, or proof that public discourse had gone too far? Online, the split was just as sharp. But in raw numbers, Jasmine's supporters were louder. High-profile reactions poured in. An award-winning actress tweeted, "This is why I love live TV. Truth slips past the filters." A retired NBA star posted, "Jasmine Crockett, I don't know you, but if you ever run for president, I'm voting for you." Even some conservative commentators begrudgingly admitted she'd owned the moment. By noon, Camille had sorted through hundreds of emails to Jasmine's office, flagging the most powerful. One came from a single father in New Mexico. "I don't agree with you on every policy, but I respect that you don't dance around the truth. We need more of that." Another, from a young woman in rural Idaho, read, "My mom and I watched together. I've never seen her cheer at the TV before," but with praise came backlash. A handful of op-eds accused Jasmine of abandoning civility and weaponizing personal experience. A former senator went on morning TV to insist leaders should rise above personal attacks. Thousands of viewers disagreed in the network's comment section, pointing out she'd stayed calm despite interruptions and had spoken from lived reality. Not spite, Miguel watched the analytics surge. "We've never had this much engagement so fast," he told Jasmine. "It's not just your followers, you're pulling in people who don't usually care about politics at all." Jasmine smiled faintly. "That's good, but we can't let this just be about the moment. It has to connect to something bigger." Without her prompting, advocacy groups began tagging her in posts about wage inequality, voting rights, and healthcare reform, A nonprofit invited her to keynote an upcoming conference. Grassroots organizers used her clip in local meetings. Meanwhile, Ivanka remained silent on the matter, avoiding any public acknowledgement of the exchange, a silence that only amplified Jasmine's framing. By late afternoon, her team had to set up a second phone line to manage interview requests. Camille prioritized outlets where Jasmine could speak without being reduced to a headline. One surprise came from a legendary civil rights leader in his 80s. His voice was gravelly but warm. You don't always get a chance to make people listen. When you do, use it for something that outlasts the applause. That night, Jasmine sat by her hotel window, ignoring the buzzing phone. She thought about the woman in the maroon scarf, the single mother in El Paso, and everyone else who never got the microphone. When Camille came in to review the next day's schedule, Jasmine didn't look away from the glass. Let's make sure tomorrow's about more than a viral moment. Let's make it about the people who don't get to speak. The next evening, in a modest studio inside her campaign office, just an American flag, a photo of her late grandmother, and a single camera, Jasmine addressed the public directly. I've seen the headlines, the hashtags, and the noise from both sides. Some folks say it was disrespectful. Others say it was brave. But that moment wasn't about one person versus another. It was about refusing to shrink myself to make others comfortable. For years, I've been told to change my tone, choose my words more carefully, soften the edges. But the truth is, they were never going to listen if the words challenged their comfort. And I didn't run for office to keep power comfortable. She paused, then continued. When I said, shut your mouth until you've lived what I've lived, it wasn't a personal insult. It was a line in the sand, a reminder that lived experience matters. You can read every policy paper in the world, but until you've walked in the shoes of the people you claim to represent, you're speaking from theory, not truth. Her tone sharpened. This isn't just about politics. It's about workplaces, where women are talked over. Classrooms where students get called aggressive for asking questions. Neighborhoods where people are labeled angry for speaking up. We've normalized silencing those who make us uncomfortable, and they're usually the ones who've seen the worst of the system. So speak anyway. Speak when they interrupt you, when they tell you to wait your turn, when they smile politely, while dismissing your reality. And when they tell you to watch your tone, remember, tone is the easiest excuse to ignore the truth. Finally, her voice softened again. I don't want this remembered as a viral clip. I want it remembered as a moment someone said, enough pretending. If you agreed with me yesterday, don't just like it or share it, do something. Show up at council meetings, support candidates who understand your reality. Mentor someone who's being told to tone it down. Vote like the future depends on it, because it does. We can't fix everything overnight, but we can refuse to go quiet. And if enough of us do, no one will have the power to tell us to shut our mouths again. The red light went off. Silence hung in the room. Camille whispered, "That's the clip we send first thing tomorrow." Miguel grinned. "It's going to hit just as hard as yesterday." Jasmine straightened her blazer, smiled faintly, and said, "Good. Yesterday was just the beginning."